Hey there, and welcome to Crazy Pepper, the channel where drama sizzles and revenge burns hotter than ever. If you love jaw dropping twists, bold characters, and stories that keep you guessing till the end, you're in the right place. Subscribe and dive into gripping tales of betrayal, karma, and ultimate payback. Get ready for unforgettable moments and satisfying endings, only on Crazy Pepper. Hit that though, and let the drama begin. Jason Matthews stood in the hallway of his modest two-story home, frozen by the sound of his daughter's laughter drifting from the living room. But it wasn't the warm, innocent laughter he once cherished. This was different. Sharp, mocking, cruel. God, he's so clueless, Ava's voice carried clearly through the thin walls. At 16, his eldest daughter had developed a tongue that could cut glass. Too stupid to know what's coming. Rachel, barely 14, giggled in response. Mom says he actually thinks we love him. Like, ow. The manila folder in Jason's hand, containing his latest attempt to budget their stretched finances, suddenly felt impossibly heavy. He'd been working 2 jobs for 3 years now, coming home exhausted each night to a family that barely acknowledged his existence. The construction site paid decent money, but the evening shift at the hardware store was what kept them afloat. Every muscle in his 42-year-old body ached constantly, but he'd never complained. Not once. Girls' dinner. Melissa's voice rang out from the kitchen, followed by the clatter of plates. Jason forced himself to move, his work boots heavy on the hardwood floor. The dining room felt arctic, despite the October heat still clinging to their small Indiana town. Melissa barely glanced up as he entered, her attention focused on her phone screen. Her blonde hair, perfectly styled despite claiming to be too tired to look for work, caught the overhead light. "How was your day, honey?" he asked, settling into his usual chair. "Fine." The response was automatic, delivered without looking up. His mother-in-law, Gloria, emerged from the kitchen carrying a casserole dish, her silver hair pulled back in its perpetual tight bun. She'd been living with them for 8 months now, ever since her apartment lease ended. What was supposed to be temporary had become permanent, and Jason's protests had been steamrolled by Melissa's insistence that family comes first. "Jason," Gloria said, her voice carrying that particular tone of disdain she'd perfected over their 18-year marriage. "I hope you remember we need to discuss some big changes around here." "What kind of changes?" Jason asked, though something in Gloria's smile made his stomach clench. Melissa finally looked up from her phone, exchanging a meaningful glance with her mother. "Oh, just some adjustments to how things work around here." The conversation felt loaded, cryptic in a way that made Jason's skin crawl. He'd noticed these coded exchanges more frequently lately. Shared looks, half-finished sentences, conversations that stopped abruptly when he entered a room. "Could you be more specific?" he pressed. "Don't worry about it," Ava said, sliding into her chair with that teenage smirk he'd grown to hate. "You'll figure it out eventually. Maybe." Rachel giggled again, and Jason felt something inside him wither. When had his family become strangers? When had love been replaced by this cold, calculating distance? After dinner, he retreated to the garage, his one sanctuary in a house that no longer felt like home. The familiar smell of motor oil and sawdust usually calmed him, but tonight, even his workshop felt tainted. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through his contacts, looking for someone to call. Someone who might care about the growing hollow in his chest. The list was embarrassingly short. Back inside, he headed toward the bedroom, pausing outside Ava's door when he heard her voice through the thin walls. "No, seriously, Mom has it all figured out," she was saying, presumably to a friend. "Like, he has no idea what's coming. She's going to get everything. The house, his pension, probably his truck, too. He's so pathetic he'll probably just roll over and take it." Jason's hand froze on the doorknob of his own bedroom. His pension? The one he'd been paying into for 23 years? The one that was supposed to secure their future? The best part is Mom says if he tries to fight it, she'll just say he's unstable or whatever, like, who's going to believe him over her? He's just some construction worker who can barely string 2 sentences together. The casual cruelty in his daughter's voice hit him like a physical blow. He stumbled into his bedroom where Melissa was already under the covers, her back turned to his side of the bed. "Melissa," he whispered. "I'm sleeping," she replied, though her phone screen glowed beneath the blankets. Jason lay awake until 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling and replaying every interaction from the past months. The puzzle pieces were starting to form a picture he didn't want to see. The next morning, he woke to an empty house. A note on the kitchen counter informed him that Melissa had taken the girls shopping and wouldn't be back until evening. He wandered through the rooms, seeing them with new eyes. When had family photos started disappearing? When had Melissa stopped wearing her wedding ring? In the living room, Rachel's tablet lay abandoned on the coffee table. Jason had bought it for her last Christmas, working overtime for 2 months to afford it. Now it sat there like an accusation, another symbol of his failed attempts to buy love that had never been genuine to begin with. Something made him pick it up. The screen was still unlocked, open to a messaging app he didn't recognize. His finger hovered over the screen, every moral instinct telling him to put it down. But something else, a growing sense of self-preservation, made him scroll up. What he found made his blood turn to ice. A group chat titled Freedom Plan with 5 participants: Melissa, Ava, Rachel, Gloria, and someone named Zane, a name Jason didn't recognize. The messages went back months. Melissa, he suspects nothing. Still working both jobs like a good little drone. Gloria, make sure the girls keep treating him like garbage. Need him isolated when we make our move. Ava, easy. He's such a loser, it's actually fun. Zane, remember the goal is to make him snap. Get it on record, use it in court. Melissa, my lawyer says with his temper documented, I can get full custody and spousal support. Rachel, what if I don't want to lie about him touching us? Gloria, you'll do what your mother tells you. This man has been bleeding our family dry for years. Zane, just stick to the plan. Few more months and he'll be out of the picture permanently. Jason's hands shook as he scrolled through weeks of messages. Detailed plans to drain his bank accounts, fabricate misuse claims, turn his own children into weapons against him. They discussed his work schedule, his habits, even his emotional vulnerabilities with the cold calculation of military strategists. In the most recent messages, they debated whether to plant pills in his truck or simply wait for him to lose it naturally. Melissa. Either way, he's finished. 20 years of pretending to love that pathetic man is finally paying off. The tablet slipped from Jason's numb fingers, clattering to the floor. The sound echoed through the empty house like a bang. He printed every message, his hands moving on autopilot while his mind reeled. 20 years. His entire adult life had been a lie, and now his family was actively working to destroy what little remained. As he hid the printed pages in his workshop, Jason felt something fundamental shift inside him. The man who'd spent 2 decades trying to be worthy of love was dying, and something harder was taking his place. He quietly packed a voice recorder into the kitchen drawer as the front door opened, and familiar voices filled the house, his daughter's laughter, Melissa's casual commands, Gloria's sharp criticisms. They'd made their choice months ago. Now it was time for him to make his. So, I'm the joke, he whispered to himself, testing how the words felt in his mouth. They tasted like freedom. The voice recorder had been running for 3 days when Jason finally caught what he needed. Standing in the hardware store's break room during his evening shift, he listened to the playback through earbuds, his coffee growing cold as his family's true voices filled his head. Mom said he's just a wallet. Ava's voice came through crystal clear from yesterday's recording. Wait till Court gets his pension. She's gonna bleed him dry. What about Rachel? Gloria's voice asked. Is she still having second thoughts? She'll fall in line, Melissa replied with casual confidence. Kids do what they're told. Besides, what's she gonna do? Choose him over us? Jason deleted the recording from the device and uploaded it to a secure cloud account his coworker Cole had helped him set up. Cole Martinez had been Jason's closest friend at the construction site for 5 years, a straight-talking former Marine who'd been through his own messy divorce. You sure about this? Cole had asked when Jason first confided in him. Once you start down this road, there's no going back. There was never anywhere to go back to, Jason had replied. I was just too stupid to see it. Now, standing in the fluorescent-lit break room, Jason felt that truth settle deeper into his bones. He wasn't the same man who'd discovered that group chat a week ago. That man had still harbored hope, still believed in the possibility of redemption. This man knew better. His phone buzzed with a text from Melissa. Working late again? Your family misses you. The casual manipulation in those words would have once made him rush home. Now he simply deleted it and finished his shift. At school the next day, Jason's world exploded. It started with a video, shaky phone footage of Melissa kissing a man Jason didn't know in the school parking lot. The man was younger, maybe 33, with the kind of easy confidence that came from never having to work 2 jobs to keep a roof over anyone's head. Within hours, the video was everywhere. Students shared it through social media, parents whispered about it in carpool lines, and Jason's phone buzzed with notifications from numbers he didn't recognize. Mr. Matthews? The voice belonged to Principal Dempsey, a thin man in his 50s who'd always treated Jason with professional courtesy during parent-teacher conferences. Now he looked deeply uncomfortable. "Could I speak with you privately?" They sat in Dempsey's office, the video playing on his computer screen for the third time. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," Dempsey said carefully. "The student who filmed this, she's in Ava's grade. She says your daughter was there when it happened." Jason's throat felt raw. Did Ava know this was being filmed? Dempsey's silence was answer enough. "She set it up," Jason said, the words coming out flat and emotionless. "My own daughter." "Mr. Matthews, I can't speak to your family dynamics, but I want you to know that this situation won't affect how we treat your daughters here at school." Jason almost laughed. "Don't worry about that. I don't think they'll be your problem much longer." The confrontation happened that evening. Jason sat at the kitchen table with printed copies of the group chat messages, the voice recordings queued up on his phone, and a manila folder containing divorce papers he'd filed that morning with his sister, Emily's help. When Melissa walked in, she was already talking. "Jason, honey, I know this looks bad, but I can explain." "Sit down," he said quietly. Something in his tone made her freeze. Behind her, Ava and Rachel hovered in the doorway, while Gloria emerged from the living room with her arms crossed. "Jason," Melissa tried again, her voice taking on that soothing tone she used when she wanted something. "That video doesn't mean anything. Zane is just a friend from my yoga class and—" He slid the printed messages across the table. Melissa's face went white as she read the first page. Behind her, Ava stepped forward to look over her shoulder, and Jason watched his daughter's confident smirk falter. 20 years of pretending to love that pathetic man," Jason read aloud, "finally paying off." "Those are your words, Melissa. From your phone, to your conspirators. You went through my private messages?" The indignation in her voice was almost admirable. "That's illegal, Jason. I could have you arrested for—" "Actually, it's Rachel's tablet, which I pay for. On my data plan, which makes it completely legal." Jason's voice remained eerily calm. "But please, keep talking. I'm recording this too." The kitchen went silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. "Here's what's going to happen," Jason continued, standing slowly. "You're going to pack your things, all of you, tonight, and you're going to get out of my house." Melissa's shock gave way to ugly laughter. "Your house?" "Jason, sweetie, I'm about to own half of everything you have. More than half, actually, once the court hears about your anger issues." "What anger issues?" Jason asked mildly. "The ones you're about to develop," Ava said, stepping forward with renewed confidence. "Right, Mom? When you tell everyone how he threatened us?" Jason looked at his eldest daughter, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. "You know what the saddest part is? I actually loved you, both of you. Even when you made it clear you hated me, I kept hoping that someday—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "You want to play games? Fine. Let's play." He pulled out his phone and hit a speed dial number. "Emily, yeah, it's time. File everything." "Who's Emily?" Gloria demanded. "My sister. She's a paralegal. Has been for 15 years. Jason smiled for the first time in weeks. "It turns out she's very good at her job." Melissa's phone rang. She answered with shaking hands, and Jason watched her face crumble as her lawyer explained that Jason had knocked her to the courthouse by 6 hours. "That's impossible," Melissa whispered. "He doesn't have a lawyer. He can't afford—" "Actually, I can. Turns out when you're not spending money on a family that hates you, you can save quite a bit." Jason gathered up the papers. "I've been planning this for exactly 1 week. You've been planning it for months. Guess we'll see who planned better." Gloria stepped forward, her face twisted with rage. "You ungrateful piece of—" The slap came fast and hard, snapping Jason's head to the side. The kitchen erupted in shocked silence. Jason touched his cheek, feeling the sting, and smiled again. "Thank you," he said softly. "I was hoping you'd do something like that." He pulled out his phone and stopped the recording. Attack and battery. On tape. In front of witnesses. Gloria's face went ashen. "Get out of my house," Jason said. "All of you." "Tonight." "This isn't over," Melissa hissed, grabbing her purse. "I'll destroy you in court. I'll take everything." "You already tried to take everything," Jason replied. "The difference is I have proof of what you are. All you have are lies about what I'm not." As they filed out, Ava turned back one last time. "Can't wait to see your face when Mom takes everything," she spat. Jason looked at the daughter he'd once carried on his shoulders, whose scraped knees he'd bandaged, whose nightmares he'd chased away with silly songs and warm milk. "I'm looking forward to seeing yours when she doesn't," he replied. After they left, Jason sat alone in his kitchen, listening to the silence. For the first time in months, his house felt like home again. His phone buzzed with a text from Cole. "How'd it go?" "It went exactly like I planned," Jason typed back. "Phase 1 is complete." Emily Matthews Rivera was everything Jason wasn't. Sharp-tongued, ruthlessly organized, and utterly unforgiving when it came to people who hurt her family. At 38, she clawed her way up from secretary to senior paralegal at one of Indianapolis's most respected family law firms, and she'd been waiting 15 years for Jason to finally stand up for himself. "I never liked her," Emily said, spreading documents across Jason's kitchen table like a general planning a siege. "From the moment you brought her home, I knew she was trouble." "But you were so damn stubborn about seeing the good in people." "Yeah, well, that stops now," Jason replied, pouring coffee for both of them. It was 6 a.m. on a Saturday, but Emily had been working on his case since dawn. "Good. Because Melissa's lawyer is David Krensky, and he's a shark. He specializes in taking working-class men to the cleaners." Emily held up a thick file. "But he's never dealt with a client who was smart enough to document everything before filing." Jason had spent the week since his family's exodus methodically preparing his case. Every financial record, every text message, every piece of evidence he could legally obtain had been copied, cataloged, and organized with the precision of a man who'd finally found his purpose. "The group chat messages are devastating," Emily continued. "Conspiracy to commit fraud, parental alienation, emotional misuse. Krensky's going to have nightmares trying to defend this." "And the voice recordings?" She pulled out a transcript of the kitchen conversation where Ava and Melissa had discussed using fabricated misuse claims in court. "This is criminal-level stuff, Jason. They're not just trying to divorce you. They were planning to frame you." Jason stared at the papers, feeling that familiar surge of cold anger. "So what's our strategy?" "Total war," Emily said without hesitation. "They declared war on you months ago. We're just going to finish it." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Jason had already moved his assets to accounts Melissa couldn't access, all perfectly legal since the joint accounts contained only his earnings, and Indiana law allowed protective financial measures when fraud was suspected. His pension was protected by federal regulations that Melissa's lawyer apparently hadn't researched. "The house is the only real asset they can claim," Emily explained. "But given the documented conspiracy and the fact that Gloria has been living there rent-free while contributing to a plan to defraud you, we can argue she's been unjustly enriched." Judge Flanders hates that kind of manipulation. Judge Patricia Flanders had a reputation for being extremely thorough and utterly intolerant of deception in her courtroom. Jason's preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following week. "Oh, what about the girls?" Jason asked quietly. Emily's expression softened slightly. "Rachel's a minor. The court will want to hear from her directly, especially given these messages where she expressed reluctance to participate in the fraud. Ava's 16, old enough to choose, but these texts where she admits to deliberately setting up the cheating video will hurt her credibility." That afternoon, Jason drove past his old life one last time. The modest rental house where Melissa and the girls were staying looked exactly like what it was, a temporary shelter for people who'd overplayed their hand. Melissa's car, which Jason was no longer legally required to pay for, sat in the driveway with an overdue registration sticker. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. M." He deleted it without responding. At the gym that evening, Cole spotted him through a brutal workout routine. Jason had always been strong from construction work, but the past week had seen him channel his anger into physical training with monk-like intensity. "You're going to burn yourself out." Cole warned, watching Jason load another plate onto the bar. I'm fine, Jason grunted, pressing the weight upward. No, you're not. You're running on rage and spite, and that's not sustainable. Cole grabbed Jason's wrist as he reached for another plate. When's the last time you ate a real meal? When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours? Jason tried to argue, but Cole was right. He'd been subsisting on protein bars and coffee, driven by a manic energy that was already starting to fray at the edges. Come on, Cole said. We're getting dinner, real food, and you're going to tell me what you're actually planning here. Over burgers at a dive bar across town, Jason finally admitted the scope of his transformation. I spent 20 years trying to be the man they wanted me to be, he said, staring at his untouched food. Quiet, accommodating, grateful for scraps of affection. I thought if I worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, they'd eventually love me back. And now? Now I realize they never loved me to begin with. The man they claimed to want was just a convenient fiction, someone to pay the bills and take the blame. Jason finally took a bite of his burger. So that man is dead. And I'm not bringing him back. Cole studied his friend's face, seeing something that hadn't been there before, a hardness that came from accepting painful truths. What happens after you win in court? Cole asked. What happens when Melissa and the girls are out of your life for good? Jason considered the question. A month ago, the idea of losing his family would have destroyed him. Now it felt like the natural consequence of their choices. I build something better, he said finally. Something real. They were interrupted by Jason's phone ringing. Emily's name appeared on the screen. Jason, we have a problem, she said without preamble. Melissa just filed a restraining order request. She's claiming you threatened her and the girls during the confrontation last week. Jason felt his newfound calm waver. Do they have any evidence? Just her word against yours. But Jason, she has a bruise on her face, photos and everything. That's impossible. I never touched her. I believe you. But the judge is going to see those photos and… Emily paused. Wait, you said you were recording the kitchen conversation, right? Do you still have that recording? Of course. Get home, now. And don't answer your door if anyone comes knocking. Jason drove home through streets that suddenly felt hostile, every police car a potential threat. But when he arrived at his house, he found something unexpected, a manila envelope taped to his front door. Inside were security camera screenshots from his neighbor's house, showing clear timestamps and angles of his front yard during the week Melissa claimed the threats occurred. A handwritten note was attached. Thought you might need these. Bob Henley, 1247 Oak Street. Bob Henley was a retired police sergeant who'd lived across the street for 30 years. Jason had helped him replace his roof the previous summer, but they'd never been particularly close. The screenshots clearly showed that Jason had left for work at his usual time every day that week, and that no confrontation had occurred in his driveway or front yard. More importantly, they showed Melissa arriving at the house on Thursday afternoon, 2 days after she'd claimed Jason had threatened her, and leaving 20 minutes later with what appeared to be a bag of ice pressed to her face. Jason called Emily immediately. She staged it, Emily said after he described the photos. She gave herself that bruise and backdated the incident. This is going to backfire on her spectacularly. How do you know? Because I know Judge Flanders. She's seen every trick in the book, and she absolutely hates false misuse claims. They undermine real sufferers. Emily's voice carried a note of savage satisfaction. Melissa just handed us everything we need to destroy her credibility. That night, Jason lay awake in his empty house, staring at the ceiling and processing the magnitude of what was happening. In 1 week, he'd gone from being a sufferer to being a hunter, and the transformation felt irreversible. His phone buzzed with a text from another unknown number. You think you're so smart. We'll see who's laughing when this is over. Jason smiled in the darkness and typed back, I already know who's going to be laughing. The question is whether you'll still be around to hear it. He sent the message, then blocked the number and turned off his phone. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. The courtroom was smaller than Jason had expected, with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. Judge Patricia Flanders sat behind an imposing bench, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun that matched her reputation for no-nonsense jurisprudence. Melissa sat at the plaintiff's table with David Krensky, a sharp-suited man in his 50s who projected the kind of confidence that cost $300 an hour. She dressed carefully for the hearing. Conservative blouse, minimal makeup, and a yellow-purple bruise on her left cheek that looked appropriately tragic under the harsh lights. Jason sat with Emily and her supervising attorney, Margaret Chen, a formidable woman who'd agreed to take the case after reviewing Jason's evidence. The restraining order hearing had been expedited due to the alleged domestic violence, but Chen had convinced the judge to hear arguments about temporary custody and financial support at the same time. Your Honor, Krensky began, his voice carrying practiced sympathy, my client has endured years of emotional and financial misuse from a man who has now escalated to physical violence. Mrs. Matthews fears for her safety and that of her minor children. He presented the photos of Melissa's bruise with theatrical precision, describing a pattern of controlling behavior that painted Jason as a textbook misuser. Mr. Matthews systematically isolated my client from financial resources, forced her mother to live in unsafe conditions, and when Mrs. Matthews finally found the courage to leave, he responded with threats and violence. Jason listened to his life being rewritten into a narrative of systematic oppression, marveling at how skillfully Krensky wove together real events and complete fabrications. In this version, Jason's long work hours became deliberate isolation tactics, his financial prudence became economic misuse, and his recent discovery of their conspiracy became evidence of paranoid delusions. Furthermore, Krensky continued, Mr. Matthews has engaged in illegal surveillance of his family, violated their privacy by accessing personal communications, and has been systematically preparing to abandon his responsibilities as a husband and father. When it was Margaret Chen's turn, she approached the bench with the casual confidence of someone holding a royal flush. Your Honor, the petitioner's claims are not just false. They constitute criminal fraud. She placed a thick folder on the judge's desk. We have extensive documentation proving that Mrs. Matthews and her co-conspirators have been planning this exact scenario for months. The group chat messages hit the courtroom like a bomb. Chen read selected excerpts aloud, her voice matter-of-fact as she detailed the conspiracy to defraud Jason financially and frame him for domestic violence. Make sure he snaps, Chen quoted. Get it on record, use it in court. These are Mrs. Matthews' own words, Your Honor, sent to her mother, her daughters, and her lover as part of a deliberate plan to manufacture evidence of misuse. Judge Flanders' expression grew progressively stonier as Chen presented the evidence, the voice. Recordings, the neighbor's security footage, the timeline proving Melissa had staged her own injury. Mrs. Matthews, the judge said, her voice cutting through the courtroom's tension. Are you claiming that these text messages are fabricated? Melissa glanced desperately at her lawyer. Your Honor, those messages were taken out of context. My husband was becoming increasingly unstable, and we were concerned. Ma'am, Judge Flanders interrupted, I have been on this bench for 17 years. I've seen real domestic violence, and I've seen people fabricate it for leverage in custody disputes. This, she held up the printed messages, is fraud. The judge's gaze shifted to Jason. Mr. Matthews, I want to be clear that your decision to record conversations in your own home was legally sound, but I'm troubled by the emotional impact this situation must have had on your minor children. Your Honor, Jason said, speaking for the first time, my youngest daughter expressed reluctance to participate in this conspiracy. I believe she was coerced. I'd like to speak with both children in chambers, separately. The next hour felt eternal. Jason sat in the hallway while Judge Flanders interviewed his daughters, trying to read Emily's face for clues about how it was going. When they returned to the courtroom, Rachel's eyes were red from crying, while Ava maintained her defiant posture despite looking shaken. Based on my conversations with both minors, Judge Flanders announced, I'm granting Mr. Matthews temporary custody of Rachel, age 14. The child has expressed genuine remorse for her participation in what she describes as her mother's plan, and I believe she was acting under duress. Melissa gasped audibly. Your Honor, you can't. Mrs. Matthews, the judge's voice carried a warning. You are in enough trouble already. I suggest you remain silent. Judge Flanders turned to Ava. Miss Matthews, you are 16 years old enough to understand the consequences of your choices. The evidence suggests you actively participated in creating and distributing video evidence of your mother's infidelity. with the specific intent of humiliating your father. Is this accurate? Ava's lawyer had advised her to remain silent, but her teenage arrogance overrode her legal counsel. He deserved it, she said defiantly. He's pathetic. Mom deserves better than someone who can't even— That's enough, Judge Flanders cut her off. Miss Matthews, you will remain in your mother's custody, as that appears to be your preference. However, you should understand that your actions have demonstrated a concerning lack of moral judgment. The judge's final ruling was devastating for Melissa's case. The restraining order was denied with prejudice, meaning it could never be refiled. Jason was granted temporary custody of Rachel, temporary exclusive use of the marital home, and protection from further financial interference. Mrs. Matthews, Judge Flanders concluded, you have 30 days to find alternative housing. The preliminary evidence suggests you have committed fraud, perjury, and possibly criminal conspiracy. I am referring this matter to the prosecutor's office for investigation. As the courtroom cleared, Jason felt something he hadn't experienced in months: hope. Rachel approached him hesitantly, her face streaked with tears. "Dad?" she whispered. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to hurt you, but Mom said if I didn't go along with it, she'd make sure I never saw you again anyway." Jason knelt to her level, seeing his younger daughter clearly for the first time in months. Beneath the teenage attitude and manufactured hostility, she was still the little girl who used to help him fix cars in the garage. "It's okay, sweetheart," he said softly. "We're going to figure this out together." As they left the courthouse, Jason's phone buzzed with notifications. The local news had picked up the story. Apparently, courthouse reporters had been present for the hearing, and the tale of the Freedom Plan conspiracy was already spreading through social media. By evening, Jason's phone was ringing constantly with calls from reporters, neighbors, and people he hadn't spoken to in years. The story had struck a nerve, particularly among divorced fathers who saw their own experiences reflected in Jason's ordeal. "Dad," Rachel said over dinner in their quiet kitchen, "are you going to be famous now?" Jason considered the question. Fame wasn't what he wanted, but visibility might serve a purpose. "Maybe," he said finally. "Would that bother you?" Rachel shook her head. "I think people should know what Mom did. I think other kids should know that it's not okay to hurt your parents just because someone tells you to." That night, Jason sat in his workshop, surrounded by tools and half-finished projects that suddenly felt meaningful again. His phone showed dozens of missed calls and messages, but he ignored them all except one, a text from Cole. "Saw the news. You did it, brother. How does it feel?" Jason typed back, "Like the beginning, not the end." He was right. Within days, the local story would go viral, turning Jason into an unexpected symbol of wrongfully vilified fathers. But first, Melissa and her allies would try one final, desperate gambit that would test everything Jason had learned about fighting dirty. The viral explosion happened overnight. Jason woke to find his story trending on multiple social media platforms, with hashtags like #FreedomPlanExposed and #JusticeForJason spreading across the internet like wildfire. The group chat messages had been leaked, not by Jason, who'd been careful to only release them in court, but by someone with access to courthouse records. By 7 a.m., Jason's driveway was filled with news vans. "Mr. Matthews." A reporter thrust a microphone toward him as he tried to leave for work. "How does it feel to be vindicated?" "I'm not vindicated yet," Jason replied carefully, following the media strategy Emily had hastily outlined over the phone. "I'm just grateful the truth is coming out." The coverage was overwhelmingly sympathetic. The story had everything: a hardworking everyman, a cartoonishly villainous conspiracy, and documentation so thorough it read like a legal thriller. Editorial boards praised Jason's methodical approach, while social media erupted with supportive messages from fathers who'd faced similar situations. But the attention came with consequences. Melissa had lost her job at the medical billing company where she'd worked part-time. The viral nature of the story, combined with her employer's discovery that she'd been accessing the internet during work hours to coordinate her freedom plan, had made her position untenable. Gloria faced her own reckoning. Her church, a conservative congregation that took a dim view of infidelity and fraud, had asked her to step down from her position on the Women's Auxiliary Board. Longtime friends crossed the street to avoid her at the grocery store. Even Ava, despite her defiant courtroom performance, was struggling. The cheating video that had started everything continued to circulate among her classmates, now attached to the larger story of her family's conspiracy. Former friends distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with someone who'd so publicly betrayed her own father. "She's been skipping school," Rachel confided to Jason over breakfast. "Mom says she's sick, but really she just doesn't want to face everyone." Jason felt a complicated mix of satisfaction and genuine sadness. Ava had made her choices, but she was still his daughter, or had been once upon a time. "I didn't want this for her," he admitted to Rachel. "I wanted all of you to have better lives, not destroyed ones. But she helped destroy yours first," Rachel pointed out with the brutal honesty that teenagers possessed. Maybe she needed to learn that actions have consequences. The media attention intensified when investigative reporters began digging deeper into the story. What they found painted an even darker picture of systematic manipulation. Zane Morrison, Melissa's lover and co-conspirator, turned out to have a history of targeting married women in vulnerable situations. Two other women came forward with similar stories of being coached to manufacture misuse claims against their husbands. "He's a hunter," Emily explained during one of their strategy sessions. "He specifically targets women in failing marriages and convinces them to escalate the situation for financial gain. Then he disappears once the legal bills start mounting." Sure enough, Zane had vanished. His apartment was empty, his phone disconnected, and his social media accounts deleted. Melissa found herself not only publicly humiliated and unemployed, but also abandoned by the man she'd risked everything to be with. The school board meeting was Jason's idea. If the story was going to be public anyway, he wanted to control the narrative and use it for something constructive. "I'm not here for revenge," he told the packed auditorium, standing at the podium where he'd once attended boring PTA meetings as an afterthought in his own family. "I'm here because what happened to me is happening to other fathers, and their children are being used as weapons." He spoke for 15 minutes about parental alienation, about the damage done to children who were coached to betray their parents, and about the need for schools to recognize warning signs when families were being systematically destroyed. The response was overwhelming. 3 other fathers approached him after the meeting, sharing their own stories of being alienated from their children through similar tactics. 2 mothers admitted they'd witnessed behavior like Melissa's in their own social circles, but hadn't known how to intervene. "You've started something," Cole observed as they left the school together. "This is bigger than just your family now." Jason nodded, feeling the weight of unexpected responsibility. "Maybe that's what I'm supposed to do with all this." Maybe getting destroyed was just the first step. The criminal investigation moved quickly. Gloria was arrested first. Her attempts to forge financial documents in Jason's name had left a clear paper trail that prosecutor Sarah Kim could follow from her office. The charges included identity theft, forgery, and conspiracy to commit fraud. "She actually tried to take out a loan using your social security number," Emily reported with incredulous laughter. "After everything that's happened, she thought she could still pull one over on you." Melissa's arrest came 2 days later. The combination of fraud, perjury, and conspiracy charges carried serious potential sentences, and her lawyer was already pushing for a plea agreement. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source. "Dad," Rachel said one evening, her voice unusually hesitant, "there's something I need to tell you about Mom and Zane." She pulled out her phone and showed him a video, shaky footage shot through a bedroom window. Jason recognized his own house, his own bedroom, and he recognized the date stamp, 3 months earlier, during one of his evening shifts at the hardware store. "Ava took this," Rachel explained quietly. "She was supposed to be at soccer practice, but she came home early and saw them together." "In your bed?" Jason stared at the screen, watching his wife betray him in the most intimate way possible. In the bed where they'd once planned their future together. "Why are you showing me this?" he asked. "Because Ava was going to use it in court. She thought if you saw it, you'd completely lose control and do something that would prove you really were dangerous." Rachel's voice broke slightly. "She wanted to destroy you completely." Jason felt something cold and final settle in his chest. This wasn't just infidelity or even conspiracy. This was sadistic cruelty designed to inflict maximum psychological damage. "What changed her mind?" he asked. "She didn't change her mind. I stole her phone and deleted the video from her cloud storage. But I kept a copy just in case." Rachel looked up at him with eyes that seemed far too old for 14. I couldn't let her do that to you. Even when I was going along with Mom's plan, I couldn't let them hurt you like that. Jason pulled his daughter into a hug, feeling genuinely proud of her for the first time in months. Thank you, he whispered, for protecting me. I should have protected you sooner, Rachel replied. I should have never gone along with any of it. The video never saw the light of day. Jason had Emily seal it as evidence but made sure it would never be released publicly. Some humiliations were private, even in the midst of public vindication. A week later, Jason received an unexpected visitor. Principal Dempsey stood on his doorstep, looking uncomfortable but determined. Mr. Matthews, I wanted to apologize, he said. When that first video came out, I made assumptions about your family situation that weren't fair. What video? Jason asked, confused. The one of your wife and her friend? In the school parking lot? Dempsey shifted awkwardly. I thought maybe you were one of those husbands who didn't pay attention, who let his marriage fall apart through neglect. I see now that you were the sufferer of a very sophisticated deception. Jason invited him in for coffee, curious about where this conversation was leading. I've been an educator for 23 years, Dempsey continued. I've seen a lot of family dysfunction, but I've never seen anything quite like what your family did to you. The planning, the coordination, the way they weaponized your own children. He trailed off, shaking his head. There's something else, Dempsey said finally. Ava came to see me yesterday. She wants to transfer schools. Because of the attention? Because she's finally starting to understand what she participated in. The other students aren't just making fun of her for the video anymore. They're genuinely disturbed by what she helped do to you. She's become a cautionary tale about what happens when children turn against their parents. Jason felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. Is she asking to come home? No, Dempsey said gently. But she's asking if there's any way to undo what she's done. I told her that some mistakes can't be undone, but they can be learned from. That evening, Jason sat in his workshop with Rachel, both of them working on a birdhouse project that had been abandoned months earlier. The familiar rhythm of working with his hands felt therapeutic, and Rachel's quiet company was a balm he hadn't realized he needed. Dad? Rachel said, not looking up from the piece she was sanding. Do you think you'll ever forgive Mom and Ava? Jason considered the question carefully. I think forgiveness and trust are different things. I might forgive them someday for my own peace of mind. But I'll never trust them again. And I'll never let them back into my life in a way that could hurt me. What about me? Rachel's voice was small. Do you trust me? Jason set down his tools and looked at his daughter. Really looked at her. She'd made mistakes, terrible ones, but she'd also found the courage to stop making them. I'm learning to trust you again, he said honestly. Every day, you show me a little more that you're choosing to be the person I always hoped you could be. Rachel smiled, the first genuinely happy expression Jason had seen from her in over a year. I want to be better than I was, she said. I want to be someone you can be proud of. You already are, Jason replied, and meant it. Outside, a car drove slowly past their house, reporters or curiosity seekers most likely. Jason's story had made him temporarily famous, but fame was just a byproduct of something more important, the slow, careful reconstruction of his life from the ashes of betrayal. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Melissa's trial was still months away. Ava remained estranged and bitter, and Jason was still learning how to be a single father to a daughter who was rebuilding her own moral foundation. But tonight, in his workshop, with Rachel humming softly as she worked on their project, Jason felt something he hadn't experienced in years: contentment. The man they'd wanted to erase was gone, that was true. But the man who'd taken his place was stronger, wiser, and finally free to become who he was always meant to be. 6 months after the courthouse revelations, Jason's life had settled into a rhythm he wouldn't have recognized a year earlier. The media attention had mostly faded, though he still received occasional interview requests from podcasters and family rights advocates who wanted to discuss his case. The most significant change was his relationship with Rachel. The sullen, hostile teenager who'd participated in her mother's conspiracy had gradually been replaced by a thoughtful young woman who seemed determined to atone for her past choices. I got accepted, Rachel announced, bursting into the kitchen with a letter in her hand. The summer program at the Children's Advocacy Center. They want me to help with their peer counseling initiative. Jason looked up from his morning coffee, feeling a surge of pride. Rachel had spent months volunteering with organizations that helped children from broken homes, driven by what she called her penance project. That's incredible, sweetheart. Are you sure you're ready for that kind of emotional work? I think I understand better than most kids what it feels like to be manipulated by adults who are supposed to protect you, Rachel said seriously. Maybe I can help other kids recognize the signs before they do things they'll regret forever. The contrast with Ava couldn't have been starker. Jason's older daughter had spent the past 6 months spiraling deeper into anger and isolation. She'd dropped out of high school, despite being only months away from graduation, and was living with Melissa in a cramped apartment on the wrong side of town. She's working at a fast food place, Rachel reported during one of their dinner conversations. Ava Matthews, who used to say she was too good to work retail, is asking people if they want fries with that. Jason tried to feel satisfaction about Ava's comeuppance, but mostly he just felt sad. His older daughter had always been intelligent and capable. Her participation in Melissa's conspiracy had been a choice born of entitlement and cruelty, not necessity. Does she ever ask about me? Jason asked. Rachel's expression grew uncomfortable. Sometimes, but then she gets angry and says it's your fault her life is ruined. Her life isn't ruined, Jason said firmly. She's 18 now. She can choose to learn from her mistakes and build something better, or she can choose to stay bitter and blame everyone else. But that's her choice to make. Melissa's legal troubles had only grown worse. The criminal trial had resulted in convictions on 3 felony counts, though she'd avoided jail time through a plea agreement that required extensive community service and restitution payments. The civil lawsuit Jason had filed, Emily's idea, designed to recover the money Melissa had stolen over the years, had been more successful. The judge awarded you everything you asked for, Emily reported during one of their regular strategy sessions. The house, the savings, the retirement accounts, plus damages for emotional distress, Melissa will be paying you back for the next 15 years. What about Gloria? Prison. 18 months, though she'll probably serve less than a year if she behaves herself. Emily's smile was sharp with satisfaction. Identity theft is a federal crime, and the judge wasn't feeling lenient toward a woman who tried to destroy her own son-in-law's credit while living in his house, rent-free. The most unexpected development had been Zane's reappearance. Jason's story had attracted the attention of law enforcement agencies in 3 states, all investigating similar cases involving the same man. When Zane was finally arrested in Arizona, he was running the same scam on a different family. He's looking at serious federal time, Emily explained. Mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy across state lines. The FBI says he's been doing this for at least 5 years, maybe longer. Jason felt a grim satisfaction knowing that Zane would face consequences for his carnivory behavior, but mostly he felt grateful that the man was permanently out of their lives. The real transformation had been in Jason himself. The broken, desperate man who'd discovered that group chat 10 months earlier barely existed anymore. In his place was someone harder, more confident, and surprisingly at peace with his new reality. You're different, Cole observed during one of their weekly gym sessions. Not just stronger physically, though you are that too. You carry yourself differently now. Jason considered his friend's observation as he loaded plates onto the barbell. I spent 20 years trying to be worthy of love from people who were incapable of giving it. Now I know better. So what's the plan? You gonna stay single forever? The question was one Jason had been asking himself lately. At 43, he wasn't old, and the attention from his story had brought unexpected social opportunities. Women reached out to him through social media, and he'd been asked on dates by several attractive, seemingly normal people. I'm not ready yet, Jason admitted. I need to make sure I can trust my own judgment before I risk getting involved with someone new. Fair enough, but don't wait too long. You've got a lot to offer the right person. Jason's phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Emergency at school. Can you come get me? 20 minutes later, Jason found his daughter sitting in the principal's office, her face flushed with anger, and what looked like the beginning of a black eye. What happened? Jason asked, immediately checking her for other injuries. Ava happened, Rachel said through gritted teeth. She showed up during lunch and started screaming at me in front of everyone. Called me a traitor and a daddy's girl, said I destroyed our family. Principal Dempsey looked uncomfortable. Mr. Matthews, we've had to ban Ava from campus. This is the third time she's appeared here to maltreat Rachel. We're considering a restraining order. Did she punch you? Jason asked, gently examining Rachel's eye. I punched her back, Rachel said defiantly. She grabbed me and started shaking me, calling me names, so I punched her in the nose. Despite the seriousness of the situation, Jason felt a flicker of pride. Rachel had learned to defend herself, both physically and emotionally. Are you pressing charges? Dempsey asked. Jason looked at his daughter, seeing the determination in her eyes. What do you want to do, Rachel? I want her to leave me alone, Rachel said firmly. I want to finish high school without having to worry about my own sister attacking me for telling the truth. Jason nodded. Then yes, we're pressing charges. And we want that restraining order. That evening, as they sat together in the living room with ice on Rachel's eye, Jason's phone rang. Melissa's name appeared on the screen, the first time she'd called in months. Don't answer it, Rachel advised. But Jason was curious. He put the phone on speaker. Jason? Melissa's voice was different, smaller, more fragile than he remembered. I heard about what happened at the school. I'm sorry. She's not handling things well. That's not my problem anymore, Jason replied calmly. I know you hate me, Melissa continued, her voice breaking slightly. I know I deserve it. But Ava is your daughter too, and she's destroying herself. Maybe if you talk to her. No. Jason's voice was firm but not angry. I spent 18 years trying to help Ava become a better person. She chose a different path. Now she gets to live with the consequences. She was just a kid, Jason. She was following my lead. She was old enough to know right from wrong, old enough to understand that actions have consequences, and old enough to choose cruelty over kindness. Jason paused, gathering his thoughts. You want to help her? Then help her accept responsibility for her choices instead of making excuses. There was silence on the other end of the line. I never meant for things to go this far, Melissa said finally. I thought I could have both. The security you provided and the excitement Zane offered. I thought I was smart enough to manage it all. You were smart enough, Jason replied. You just weren't wise enough to understand that some betrayals can't be undone. After he hung up, Rachel looked at him with something approaching awe. How do you stay so calm when you talk to her? She asked. Because anger is what she expects. It's what she's counting on. The idea that I'm still the same broken man she could manipulate with guilt and emotional manipulation. Jason smiled slightly. But I'm not that man anymore. And that terrifies her more than anger ever could. A week later, Jason received an unexpected letter. The return address showed Ava's name, written in the careful handwriting he remembered from her childhood homework assignments. Dad, the letter began, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to say some things. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I know everyone thinks I should apologize and beg for forgiveness. But I'm not ready to do that yet because I'm not sure I'm sorry for the right reasons. I'm sorry I got caught. I'm sorry my life is ruined. I'm sorry everyone looks at me like I'm some kind of monster. But I don't know if I'm sorry for what we did to you, because I still don't understand why you deserve better treatment than we gave you. Rachel says you've changed, that you're stronger now and happier without us. She says you don't need us anymore, and that's why you won't forgive us. Maybe she's right. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I know we can't go back. I know I made choices that can't be undone. But someday, when I figure out how to be a better person, I might want to try to make things right. This isn't an apology because I'm not ready for that yet. This is just me saying that I know what we lost, and I know it was my fault too. Ava Jason read the letter twice, then handed it to Rachel. She's starting to understand, Rachel said after reading it. Not there yet, but starting. Maybe, Jason agreed. But understanding and changing are different things. And even if she does change, that doesn't mean she gets to come back into our lives. Would you ever consider it, if she really did become a better person? Jason thought about the question seriously. I might consider forgiving her for my own peace of mind. But trust? The kind of trust you need to have a real relationship with someone? That's gone forever. That night, Jason sat in his workshop, working on a rocking chair he was building for Rachel's upcoming graduation present. The familiar rhythm of working with his hands had become meditative, a way to process the complex emotions that still arose when he thought about his former family. His phone buzzed with a text from Cole. Saw the news about Zane's sentencing. 7 years federal time. Thought you'd want to know. Jason smiled grimly and typed back. Good. One less hunter on the streets. As he continued working, Jason reflected on how much his life had changed. A year ago, he'd been a broken man desperately trying to hold together a family that was actively working to destroy him. Now he was building something new, a relationship with Rachel based on honesty and mutual respect, a career that gave him purpose, and a sense of self-worth that couldn't be taken away by other people's opinions. The man they'd wanted to erase was gone, but the man who'd taken his place was exactly who Jason was meant to be all along. 1 year after the courthouse revelations, Jason stood before a packed auditorium at Indiana University, delivering the keynote address for a conference on parental alienation and family court reform. The nervous, broken man who'd once struggled to speak up at PTA meetings had been replaced by someone who commanded attention through quiet authority rather than raised volume. The system isn't broken by accident, Jason told the audience of lawyers, judges, and family advocates. It's broken by design, because chaos creates billable hours and genuine justice threatens the status quo. His nonprofit organization, Father's Voice, had grown from a simple blog into a nationwide network providing legal resources, emotional support, and advocacy training for men facing similar situations. The work was emotionally draining, but deeply meaningful. Every case they helped resolve felt like a small victory against the machinery that had nearly destroyed his own life. Mr. Matthews, a reporter approached him after his speech. Your story has inspired thousands of fathers to fight back against manipulation and fraud. What would you say to men who are just beginning to realize they're being systematically betrayed? Document everything, trust your instincts, and remember that being a good man doesn't mean being a doormat, Jason replied. The people who truly love you won't require you to sacrifice your dignity to earn their affection. Rachel, now 15 and preparing for her sophomore year, had become Jason's unofficial co-founder for Father's Voice. Her perspective as a child who'd been weaponized against her own father provided unique insights that adult advocates couldn't offer. A lot of kids don't realize they're being manipulated, she explained during a panel discussion about children's experiences in high-conflict divorces. They think they're protecting the sufferer parent, not understanding that they're actually being turned into emotional weapons. Her transformation had been remarkable. The sullen, hostile teenager of 2 years ago had evolved into a confident young woman with a strong moral compass and an unusual degree of emotional maturity for her age. I want to be a family lawyer, she announced over dinner one evening. Specifically, I want to help kids who are caught in the middle of situations like ours. Jason felt a surge of pride mixed with concern. That's going to be emotionally difficult work. Are you sure you're ready for that kind of stress? I think I'm better prepared than most people would be, Rachel replied thoughtfully. I understand both sides, what it feels like to be manipulated into betraying someone you love, and what it feels like to be betrayed by people who should protect you. The legal aftermath of Melissa's conspiracy had finally concluded. She'd served her community service sentence and was now working 2 part-time jobs to make her restitution payments, living in subsidized housing with Ava, who'd eventually gotten her GED and was working at a local call center. They're both struggling, Emily reported during one of their quarterly check-ins. Melissa's essentially starting her life over at 42, and Ava seems to be stuck in a cycle of anger and self-pity. Have either of them tried to contact Rachel directly? Jason asked. Not since the restraining order. But I think Ava sends her messages through mutual friends sometimes. Rachel usually ignores them. Jason nodded approvingly. Rachel had learned to protect her emotional boundaries, understanding that maintaining contact with people who deliberately hurt her wasn't loyalty. It was self-destruction. The most unexpected development had been Jason's personal life. 6 months earlier, he'd started dating Dr. Sarah Chen, a family therapist he'd met through his advocacy work. Their relationship had developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared values rather than passion or neediness. She's different from Mom, Rachel observed after meeting Sarah for the first time. She actually listens when you talk, and she doesn't make everything about herself. Sarah specialized in helping families recover from high-conflict divorces, and her professional insights had helped Jason understand his own experience in broader context. What happened to you wasn't unusual, Sarah explained during one of their early conversations. Parental alienation, financial misuse, conspiracy to commit fraud. These tactics are actually quite common in certain types of divorce cases. You were just better at documenting the evidence than most sufferers. Sufferers, Jason repeated thoughtfully. I still have trouble thinking of myself that way. That's because you fought back effectively. Most people in your situation either don't recognize what's happening until it's too late, or they recognize it but don't have the resources to respond appropriately. Sarah's professional demeanor softened slightly. You saved yourself, Jason. And probably Rachel, too. Their relationship was still new, still careful, but Jason found himself cautiously optimistic about the possibility of building something healthy with someone who understood both his scars and his strength. Are you going to marry her? Rachel asked one day with typical teenage directness. We're taking things slowly, Jason replied diplomatically. Good. I like her, but I also like having you to myself for a while. It's been nice having a parent who actually pays attention to me. The comment was a casual one, but it highlighted how dramatically their lives had changed. Jason now attended every school event Rachel participated in, helped with homework, and maintained the kind of close relationship he'd always wanted with his children, but had been systematically prevented from developing. Speaking of attention, Rachel continued, I got a letter from Ava yesterday. Jason felt his stomach tighten slightly. Despite the restraining order, Ava occasionally found ways to reach out to her sister, usually with dramatic pleas for reconciliation or bitter accusations about the family's dissolution. What did she say this time? She's pregnant, Rachel said quietly. The guy she's been dating left when he found out. She's scared and alone and wants to know if we can help. Jason felt a complex mix of emotions, sympathy for his older daughter's situation, frustration with her continued poor choices, and protectiveness toward Rachel, who still struggled with guilt about their family's destruction. What do you want to do? He asked carefully. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. I want to help her, but I also know that Ava has never taken responsibility for what she did to us. If we help her now, is she going to learn from this experience? Or is she just going to expect us to fix her problems forever? It was a remarkably mature question from a 15-year-old, and Jason felt proud of his daughter's ability to think through the emotional and practical implications of her choices. Those are exactly the right questions to ask, he said. What's your gut telling you? That Ava is still the same person who helped destroy our family, and being pregnant doesn't automatically make her someone I can trust. Rachel's voice was sad but firm. I feel sorry for her, but I can't save her from herself. Jason nodded, understanding that this decision represented a crucial step in Rachel's emotional development. She was learning to distinguish between compassion and enabling, between forgiveness and self-protection. I support whatever choice you make, he said, but I'm proud of you for thinking it through so carefully. Will you help me write a letter? Something that's kind, but also clear about boundaries? They spent the evening crafting a response that wished Ava well but declined to provide financial or emotional support. The letter acknowledged the difficulty of her situation, while making it clear that reconciliation would require genuine accountability, not just temporary crisis. A month later, Jason received an unexpected phone call from Principal Dempsey. Mr. Matthews, I wanted to let you know that Ava came to see me yesterday. She wanted to know if Rachel had mentioned her recent letter. And I told her that Rachel's personal communications weren't my business, but that she seemed to be doing very well academically and emotionally. Ava seemed, I don't know how to describe it, defeated maybe? Or possibly just finally starting to accept reality. Jason felt a flicker of something that might have been hope, but he'd learned to be cautious about reading too much into Ava's periodic moments of apparent insight. Did she say anything else? She asked if I thought you and Rachel would ever forgive her. I told her that forgiveness was something she'd have to earn over time, not something she could demand or manipulate people into giving. How did she respond to that? She cried. Not angry tears or manipulative ones, just genuine sadness. Maybe she's finally starting to understand what she lost. That evening, Jason shared the conversation with Sarah, who listened with her characteristic, thoughtful attention. "Do you think you'll ever have a relationship with Ava again?" she asked. Jason considered the question carefully. "I think someday I might be able to forgive her for my own peace of mind. But trust, the kind of deep, unconditional trust you need for a real parent-child relationship, I don't think that's possible after what she participated in. And you're okay with that?" "I have to be. Some bridges can't be rebuilt, and some relationships can't be restored. But that doesn't mean I'm broken or incomplete. It just means I've learned to invest my emotional energy in people who value it." Sarah nodded, understanding the hard-won wisdom in his words. "That's probably the healthiest attitude you could have." 6 months later, Jason stood in the same courthouse where his life had been transformed. But this time he was there as an advocate for another father facing similar circumstances. The man, a soft-spoken accountant named David Miller, had discovered his own version of the Freedom Plan conspiracy, and Jason was helping him navigate the legal and emotional challenges. "I don't know how you stayed so calm through all of this," David said as they waited for the hearing to begin. "I feel like I'm going crazy most of the time." "You're not going crazy," Jason assured him. "You're having a normal reaction to abnormal behavior. The key is to channel that energy into documentation and strategic thinking instead of emotional reactions." Watching David's case unfold, Jason was struck by how much stronger and clearer he'd become over the past 2 years. The man who'd once been paralyzed by his family's betrayal was now helping others navigate similar crises with confidence and competence. "You've built something important here," Emily observed after David's successful hearing. "This organization, this advocacy work, it's making a real difference." Jason nodded, feeling a deep sense of purpose that had been absent from his life for years. "It's strange. I spent 20 years trying to be the man my family wanted me to be, and I was miserable. Now I'm being the man I was always meant to be, and I've never been happier." "Even without Ava? Even with all the pain and loss?" Jason considered the question seriously. "Especially because of the pain and loss. I had to lose everything I thought I wanted to discover what I actually needed." That evening, Jason sat with Rachel and Sarah on his back porch, watching the sunset and listening to Rachel practice a speech she was giving at an upcoming conference about children's rights in family court proceedings. "The most important thing adults need to understand," Rachel read from her notes, "is that children want to love both their parents. When we're forced to choose sides or participate in destroying one parent, we're not protecting the other parent. We're being misused ourselves." Jason felt a familiar surge of pride and amazement at his daughter's emotional intelligence and moral clarity. She'd transformed her own painful experience into wisdom that could help other families avoid similar destruction. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Sarah said softly. "You're going to help a lot of people with that message." As the sun set over their small Indiana town, Jason reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. 2 years ago, he'd been a broken man, desperately trying to hold together a family that was systematically destroying him. Now he was building something better, relationships based on honesty and mutual respect, work that gave his life meaning, and a sense of self-worth that nobody could take away. The man they'd wanted to erase was gone. But the man who'd taken his place was exactly who Jason was always meant to be. Stronger, wiser, and finally free to love and be loved by people who valued what he had to offer. His phone buzzed with a text from Cole. "Saw the news about your speech at the university. Proud of you, brother." Jason smiled and typed back, "Thanks, it's been quite a journey." "Worth it?" Cole replied. Jason looked around at his small family, Rachel editing her speech with intense concentration, Sarah reading quietly beside him, the peaceful home they'd built together from the ashes of betrayal and loss. "Every painful step," he typed back. "Every painful step